Hello, everyone. I'm Fozzie or Cam, and I'm here as always with my co-host Will. How are you doing today, Will?
I'm doing great, Cam. How about you?
I'm doing fantastic. We have a great agenda for you all today. A short agenda, but the stuff we're going to cover carries a lot of weight with it. We have a lot of really interesting topics to discuss today, and starting with it, I would briefly like to talk about a show that I recently watched. Will, I has not watched it. I recommend it, Will. It's a good show. It's on Amazon Prime Video, and it's called Invincible. Season 1 released in 2021, Season 2 released in 2024, or was it 2023? I think half of it was in 2023, half of it was in 2024. For Season 2, they did kind of the Cobra Kai thing, where they split up the seasons like that,
Mm.
which was actually kind of frustrating for me because it kind of killed the momentum the show had going for it, and that kind of ended up leading season 2 to be the weakest season. Not a bad season, but a weaker season comparatively. Um, but season 3 just finished. They released 3 episodes to start, and then it was a week by week show, and we finally reached a conclusion. Um, Season 3, and obviously Invincible is based off the comic series of the same name, and they're taking a lot from the comics, which is kind of a bummer because I want to read the comics, but I also don't want to get the show spoiled for me, so I'm gonna have to pick one at some point. Um, but I really like this season of Invincible. I liked pretty much all of the subplots. A big thing with Invincible is that there are a lot of characters, and all these characters need to be developed and have their own stories. Um, so I'm glad that we got to see pretty much all of them get all the important characters get their own arcs and their own story this season. I thought that was really cool to see, and I was really happy that that happened. Simply because there are some great characters in this show. Um, I also really like the action sequences in the show in general, actually. But season 3 had some really great fight scenes, specifically in the season 3 finale episode. A common complaint with the show is that the animation is mediocre. I see the complaints doesn't affect my enjoyment of the show as much as, I don't know, as much as you might think it would. But, it's still there. It's still kind of apparent that the show's main goal isn't to have stellar animation. It's more to just be a good show, which also totally makes sense, right? The story was great. The Cecil and Mark arc I thought was phenomenal. I really enjoyed that. And overall, I really enjoyed this season. I would be perfectly happy giving the season 3 of Invincible a very respectable 7.5 out of 10.
Awesome.
Yeah, scratch that. We're giving it an 8. We're giving Invincible Season 3 an 8 out of 10. 7.5 is way too low. It's getting an 8. And the only reason it's not higher is because I think there's actually room for improvement. I think they're
Mm.
just continuing to build up and build up and build up. I mean, there are people out there who do know that they're building up because they've read the comics. I haven't, so I don't really know what they're building up to, but whatever it is, I'm sure it's going to be awesome. But now, something we can both discuss, and Will, I'm going to actually have you go first here. Daredevil. Will's actually the resident Daredevil fan on the Everything podcast. I've recently started watching the Netflix series. I finished season 1 pretty recently, and I'm about halfway through season 2. Loving it. I'm going to give my full thoughts on season 1 in a few, but Will, without spoiling, because I haven't seen it, and probably some of our viewers haven't as well, because maybe they're catching up on the Netflix series as well. Will, give your spoiler free review so far of Daredevil Born Again, which is the new Marvel show.
Yeah, so Daredevil Born Again. So I've talked about on the podcast before how I've had my concerns about Daredevil Born Again going into it because they had to totally revamp the show. I believe they had filmed 6 episodes, and then the writers and actors strikes happened. And coming
Uh,
out of the writers and actors strikes, they totally revamped the show, brought in a new showrunner, who's the same person who was, I believe, either the showrunner or a writer on the Punisher series, brought in a new showrunner, brought in new writers, totally revamped the whole thing. I believe the original version. I mean, first of all, this is just how this shows why Marvel needed to totally reboot the whole Daredevil Born Again show, because the original version was going to have Matt Murdock, Wilson Fisk, and Frank Castle, but Vanessa was going to be recast, and Karen and Foggy weren't going to be in it. That was going to be the original version of Daredevil Born Again. Thankfully, post writers and actors strike, they corrected course, brought back the actor Ayala Zor, who played Vanessa in the original Daredevil series. She's back. Karen and Foggy were back. That, I was like, okay, that is a relief. They were making horrible decisions, but they corrected course, and I would rather them correct course versus not correct course. And then the trailer for Daredevil Born Again came out, and I loved it. I thought it was great. It was everything that I could have asked for. Then I turn on Daredevil Born Again, episode 1, the first scene, and I am not joking, the very first scene, gut punch, right out of the gate in the first scene. If you are somebody who loves the original Daredevil series, just prepare to be epically offended by what Daredevil Born Again does in its very first scene. They don't give you any time, they waste no time, just gut punch right out of the gate in the first scene. I have never seen a show like Daredevil Born Again be gone for 7 years. Fans have been waiting for it to come back, and to deliver a gut punch like they did right out of the gate, I found very offensive as a fan. So I was so upset that I had to turn episode 1 off, come back and finish it the next night, because I just needed to process what they did in the very first scene, because I was so shocked by it. But once I got over the gut punch that they did in the first scene, I was able to settle into the show more. As I was saying to you off air before the podcast, Cam, the first couple episodes I would say were C tier. I feel like they were kind of finding themselves. These last 2 episodes, episodes 3 and 4, I would say were more B tier. I feel like there's been more interesting things going on in these last couple episodes. Do I think it's the original series? Absolutely not. I think the original series is in a league of its own. This, to me, feels like the G League compared to the NBA that the original series was. So I would say if I had to have an overall grade for the show, it would be a B minus. So far, I don't feel they've had an A tier level episode yet, but I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt from the standpoint of they have 5 more episodes to go in this season. A lot. They have an entire season 2, so even though I don't feel they have been able to capture the heights of the original series thus far, they still have time to do that, so I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt there. And the final thing I'll say about Daredevil Born Again, especially for someone like you, Cam, because I'm somebody, I watched the original series and then I had a lot of space between it and Daredevil Born Again, so I was able to kind of come in and I think more quickly embrace the fresh approach that they're doing with this new show. But specifically for someone like you, Cam, who will be going from Daredevil, the original series, right into Daredevil Born Again, I would just say brace yourself for it to feel like a completely different thing. Wow. The dark tone is still there, but you can very much tell that this is a series being made by different people and not the same creative team as the original Daredevil series.
Is that a bad thing?
It's not a bad thing, but it does take getting used to, especially like if you like Daredevil, like the final episode of Daredevil season 3, like the final episode of Daredevil season 3, like when you watch that and compare that to the first episode of Daredevil Born Again, they will definitely feel like 2 different things being made by 2 totally different creative teams. So it's not a bad thing. It'll just take some getting used to, I feel like, since you'll be going right from Daredevil season 3 into Daredevil Born Again. So yeah, like my piece of advice for people who haven't watched it yet is The dark tone is still there, but just know that it's going to feel like a totally different show being made by a totally different creative team than Daredevil, than the Daredevil original series. And Matt Murdock is still in the show hugely. Wilson Fisk is still in the show hugely. Vanessa is still in the show. The Punisher they just brought back in this latest episode. So there's still familiar faces there, but they're also bringing in a bunch of new characters into the fold as well. And I would like to say something that our frequent podcast guest Mike, when he doesn't pretend to be the third host, um, when he's not pretending to be the third host of the show, when he's not doing that, we love having him on the podcast. One point he made that I thought was really good, and this will be my final point on Daredevil Born Again, is this: they've introduced a good amount of new characters in Daredevil Born Again, and initially I was like, I just don't really care much about these new characters. I wish they'd, flesh them. I wish they'd flesh them out a bit more, spend some more time developing them. But I thought Mike made a great point, which was no, they're probably intentionally not making these new characters that major in the show because they know that you're there for Daredevil and you know that they're there and they know that you're there for Fisk and they're going to give them the most screen time and have the whole show centered around those two characters' storylines. So initially I was like, boy, when they would bring in new characters, in the original Daredevil series, I would usually really like them and find them super compelling and feel like they're offering great new stuff to the show. The new characters they're introducing in Daredevil Born Again, I don't think they're bad. They're just not compelling to me like new characters that were introduced in the original Daredevil series were. But to Mike's point, they're probably doing it intentionally because they know that you're there for Daredevil and Fisk and not these new characters. And that, as a fan, I can definitely appreciate.
Yeah. So I want to bounce off something you said here. There's this episode sharks. The show starts with a shock, right? It starts.
Oh yeah, epic shock.
Jump. I'm a little upset. I'm a little upset by Disney, with Disney, because now I have an idea of what it could be, and it's because of them. It's because of the company Disney. It's because of Marvel. So obviously, I'm hip to Marvel news. I don't look at Marvel spoilers for things I haven't seen, obviously. But then I hear Season 2, Daredevil Born Again, confirmed. Vincent D'Onofrio's coming back. Charlie Cox is coming back. And I don't want confirmation for any of this. Deborah Ann Wall's Karen Page coming back. John Berthnall, Punisher, coming back. But there was something missing. And I think they spoiled their own show. Now, I don't want any confirmation on this. I don't want any reaction. Because I could be wrong. It could be something else. But Marvel has not said a single thing about Foggy Nelson returning for Season 2. Maybe he gets written out of the show. Maybe by the end of Season 1, he gets written out of the show. He has a new arc for himself, maybe, in this Daredevil Born Again, and maybe the show ends with him pursuing that and leaving this whole Matt Murdock, Nelson and Murdock thing behind, pursuing something different.
There was an article in Entertainment Weekly recently that did exclusively report that both Eldon Henson and Deborah Ann Wall will be back in Season 2. To what extent, I don't know, but we do know that both of them will be back in some capacity.
That's good to hear, because the report I saw, which was, I think it was just a screenshot off of Twitter, it literally just said it was coming back, and that was a missing name. So I'm interested to see, is that the big shock at the beginning of the season 1? Or is it something else? But I'm sure, I'm Not that I'm hearing that, that changes my opinion actually. So that actually, thank you for telling me that because
Yeah, of course.
I was actually very very upset with Marvel because they released that, and I thought they kind of essentially just publicly spoiled their own show. But I'm glad that I know that now. Thank you, Will.
Of
That's
course.
a reassurance right there. Anyway, I want to give my thoughts on season one of Daredevil. The show is good. That's a really good show. I mean, I was going in expecting there are gonna be some great fight scenes in the show. I was going out of season one thinking I just want to see more of Nelson and Murdoch working together, and I want to see more of Wilson Fisk sitting in the back seat of a car talking to Wesley. Not much more for Wesley going on here, unfortunately. Uh, I'm gonna say right now, I've read a lot of reviews for Daredevil. The most underrated character in the show is Wesley. He's a bad guy. He's such a well acted character, and he's a great
Yeah.
part of season one. And I actually was kind of upset. I was kind of upset when he died, simply because I really liked seeing him act with Wilson Fisk, and I wanted to see if there was going to be any future, maybe a sort of rivalry between him and Fisk, because it seemed that Wesley could have started his own thing and almost rivaled Fisk, but no, I think the way they handled it, killing him off, was that also a cool thing. I'm sure they're gonna maybe dive more into Karen and that in season two. Who knows? Um, I really liked it. I think Fisk is a super compelling character. I think the fact that we don't see him until like what episode 2 or 3
Yeah.
is really cool, and when we do see him, and then we keep seeing him, it feels like he's been in the show since episode 1, right? Because he just has such a strong presence on screen. I've always heard people say, "Oh, he sounds cool." Wilson Fisk sounds more than cool in Daredevil. He has the most amazing voice for a Marvel character I think I've ever heard. Everything Wilson Fisk says sounds so sincere, which you know what he's doing is wrong, but it almost makes you want to like, oh, yeah, almost agree with him even though you don't. Because what he's saying, he says it with such authority and such, like he feels to his heart and soul that it's the right thing to do. Everything he says is with such strong intent, and I think Vincent D'Onofrio brought such a cool vibe to this character, and I was really impressed by him in this season. I'm a little disappointed that he doesn't have as big of a role. I mean, it makes sense in season 2, but I know he does still have a role, and I know in season 3 he'll also have a bigger role. Um, the only the only issue I had with him in season 1, I did not care for the final fight between Fisk and Matt Murdock and that alleyway. I think that was to please the fans, and I do
Hmm.
not think that worked. I think they need him to fight. But it didn't look good. It wasn't a great fight scene. Fisk is too big to just get thrown around by Daredevil. I mean, we've seen Matt get beat pretty badly in this show, near death several times in season 1. It makes sense why they wouldn't want to do that again with Fisk. But Fisk realistically should have absolutely decimated Matt Murdock. But no, he got thrown around, and it kind of was embarrassing to watch for Fisk because I feel like that isn't what would happen. I feel like that was a little bit of a stretch. Um, I feel like there was another way that he could have taken him down. Maybe gathered all of the good police and taken care of him that way. Maybe use some sort of lawyering technique and taking him down through the legal system, which they're kind of pursuing in. Well, I guess that does also happen, but I don't know. I think there were other ways to get Wilson Fisk into prison that weren't him just punching him in the face. I think that was a little ridiculous. But that was the only real complaint I had with the show. I thought the cinematography was great. I actually didn't like the stick episode that much. I that was actually my least favorite episode in the show. The stick episode, I didn't care about that really. I just wanted the storyline with Fisk and all them to move forward, and I felt like it was kind of being held back by listening to Stick just essentially abuse Matt the whole episode in flashbacks, and I don't know. I just felt weird that this old man showing up into his life and starts like beating him to the punch and everything. I don't know. I thought that was kind of weird. I know Stick's an important character in Daredevil lore and comics, but I just wasn't a fan of that episode. I thought Stick was a well acted character. It just was kind of underwhelming because I've heard a lot about Stick, and I thought it would have been a better episode. I really like Vanessa. I really like her relationship with Wilson Fisk, and I'm interested to see where it goes in the future. What's the guy who handles the finances name in season one? The old guy.
Ben Urich.
Not Ben
Or is
Urich.
it?
That's the
Okay.
reporter.
Oh yeah,
The
yeah,
the
yeah.
one who
The
handles
reporter.
Fisk's
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
money.
yeah.
The one who handles Fisk's money. What is his name?
Let's see. You mentioned Wesley, but this is probably
No,
but
not
yeah, you're
Wesley.
talking about a different person.
I have it on the tip of my tongue. He was the older
Yeah.
guy.
Okay.
He
Okay.
gets killed in the elevator by Fisk. But anyway,
Oh
he
yeah, yeah, yeah. That guy.
that was a whole thing, right? I thought that was actually I'm like his name, but yeah, I thought that was a phenomenal subplot. Um, him poisoning Vanessa, and I was shocked that it was him. And thinking back on it makes sense. He didn't drink it, and he acted like he did drink it. Blah blah blah. I thought that was cool. Ben Urich, heartbreaking. I was I legitimately jumped, not like up. I jumped like back when I saw Ben Urich sit down at his desk to finally reveal Wilson Fisk to the world. Then the camera pans behind him, and Wilson Fisk is sitting right behind him. That was not what I expected. You don't often see Fisk doing the dirty work, and that's kind of part of what makes him so threatening because he doesn't need to. He has a bunch of people who just listen to him, and you know when he is doing the dirty work, he's probably going to do something very bad and deadly, and that's exactly what he does to old Ben Urich. He kills Ben Urich pretty violently, and that was unfortunate because I actually really liked Ben Urich, and I was actually really sad by his death. And I like the story with his wife. I'm interested to see if that gets followed up with. Um, but I thought that was a really good subplot in the show too. But I kind of felt like the wife thing and the whole newspaper thing was sort of detracting from the main story, and I wasn't always as interested in the Ben Urich stuff as I was the Matt Murdock, Nelson and Murdoch whole thing. I wasn't as interested, but you know, I still was. And speaking of Nelson, I thought I actually really liked the episode where Foggy finds out about Matt, and I really like that as time goes on, he starts to accept it. He's still not totally, he just still doesn't totally approve of it, but you know he's more lenient. He's more accepting of it, and in early season two, we see that they've kind of started to roll with it. So season one of Daredevil is gonna get a 8.2 out of 10 for me. Really good show, really solid show. Well, I see why you like it so much. Can't wait to finish it. I don't think I'm gonna watch The Defenders before Born Again, which I know isn't great, but I will watch it at some point. I just really want to get to Born Again. Because I don't want to risk seeing spoilers. That's a show because I haven't gotten any spoilers for Daredevil, and I just don't want that to happen. So I kind of want to get that done as quickly as possible. Now it's time to discuss something that's we've been meaning to discuss for quite a while here on the podcast. The Oscars, this year's Oscars. What a great ceremony it was this year. Well, how did you like the Oscars this year?
Yeah, the way I would describe the Oscars is I feel like the Oscars is the type of show that starts off strong, then goes down for a bit, and then picks back up
Yeah.
towards the end. I thought the Cynthia Erivo Ariana Grande performance. Well, I know they did that little tribute to LA video first, but Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande being the second big thing that they did at the Oscars, even before Conan O'Brien's monologue, I thought they were fantastic. Those two with their phenomenal voices to open the
Same here.
show, A plus. I thought that was just fantastic by the
You know, I
Academy.
like that.
Yeah, Conan. Listen, Conan O'Brien is a legend. I mean that guy is that guy is a comedy legend. So I think picking him uh, as the host of the Oscars was a really smart choice. And I think it's a really smart choice that they're bringing him back to host the Oscars again uh, next year. Conan O'Brien is a legend. I have absolutely no issue with him hosting the show. I thought he did a good job. In terms of the show overall, as I was saying, I feel like it starts strong, then dips down, then goes back up because they start off the show with the Ariana Grande, Cynthia Erivo performance, Conan O'Brien's monologue. They do best supporting actor, best supporting actress. I'm hooked. I'm engaged. Then they kind of go into categories that I don't care as much about, but then towards the end they start to do best actor, best actress, best director, best picture, all the big major awards that you care about. So I feel like the Oscars is a type of show, and I feel like this year's Oscars was a perfect example of that, to where kind of in the middle of it, I feel like you have to sit through a bit of a lull where there aren't as many interesting categories. But I feel that they've designed the show to where it's always going to start strong and finish strong, and that I feel is something that the Oscars does really well.
Yeah, 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 for sure. I thought I'm gonna start with my critiques first because I have less of them than compliments. I thought maybe some more musical acts would have been cool. I thought Timothy Chalamet should have went up there and done some Bob Dylan stuff like he did on SNL a few weeks back.
Yeah,
Which, by the way, I really enjoyed his SNL performance of specifically Outlaw Blues.
I thought he was fantastic.
Yeah, I thought he was great. He paid respect to Bob, but he still also did his own thing, which I thought perfect way to do it. And he's just the best at everything. He does everything with such class and integrity. I think everything Timothy Chalamet touches right now is turned into heat. It's turned into something good. You know what I mean? But anyway, I loved the opening performance from Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande. I gave Wicked a 5 out of 5. So yeah, I liked the performance of Defying Gravity quite a bit live. Cynthia has an amazing voice. Although I do wish they kind of played into more of the theatrics that were displayed in the movie and maybe kind of dressed for the part almost with like in costumes for the character, maybe with a set. It kind of just looked like they were at a concert with a boring background, which was fine. The vocal performance is really what mattered, and the message that they were sending was support for LA, and they paid homage to a lot of classics, and they performed their song that everyone wanted to hear. So it wasn't all about the theatrics and the spectacle for that performance, but I think it would have made it more interesting, and I just would have liked to see that for Defying Gravity just because I love that song so much. But moving to the meat of the show, Conan O'Brien, my favorite late night talk show host and now podcaster, was phenomenal as a host. That bit at the beginning, where he was in the substance, was hilarious. His opening monologue, while it was long, was perfect. It worked. I love the Adam Sandler edition with Timothy Chalamet again because he's the best. I thought that was hilarious. I really like Sandler. I think he's a funny guy. But Conan treated every category with respect, which has kind of been an issue in previous years. He treated everything equally. Um, he was honest about the runtime. He made a lot of funny jokes. He was able to poke at some of the celebrities without being rude, like people like Ricky Gervais have been in the past. And he didn't go too soft on people like someone like Jimmy Kimmel would have done. Jimmy Kimmel, I think, was the definition of a playing it safe host. Conan O'Brien is a good host. He knows he came in, he knew what he was doing, he was in, he was out, it was efficient, it was good, it was hilarious. I was really impressed with Conan out there. I thought most of the awards were great. Disgusted, disgusted, disgusted by Adrian Brody. Not only because the speech was the most obnoxious speech I've ever heard in my entire life. What? Who does he think he is? Telling the music to stop. Everyone else, there were several other awards won that night where they got played off the stage when they were in the middle of talking or they were about to talk, and they weren't able to say stop the music and they listened. They weren't able to do that. He did it and they stopped the music. It was unfair, I thought. His speech went way too long. I didn't care at all about what he was saying. His movie used artificial intelligence, which, on principle, you shouldn't use in your movies just because if you keep using it, it will ruin the careers of future filmmakers because it has the possibility of taking over for other filmmakers. So, I don't think that's actually, by the way, why that whole strike happened, because of the use of AI. Granted, it was different types of AI used, but AI nonetheless was used. So I was kind of disgusted by that, and that's why I just won't be watching The Brutalist. Not that I had any interest in it to begin with, but I'm not watching a movie that just shamelessly uses AI to improve an actor's vocal performance, where you have people like Timothée Chalamet, who trained for 5 years to master a Bob Dylan vocal performance and sound exactly like him. Why would I watch a movie where they use artificial intelligence and computers to make someone better when someone who's actually talented did it themselves, and I'm more interested in that movie in general? So no, I will not be watching The Brutalist, and I was not happy with the Adrian Brody win. I was happy with the Honora wins. I was glad that happened. I can't wait to watch that movie when it's on streaming. It looks phenomenal. I've wanted to see it for quite a bit, actually, before it got a wide a global release. I actually was interested in seeing it. Did I think it would go this far? No, but I'm glad it did. Mikey Madison totally deserving of that award. The biggest snub from the Oscars that wasn't nominated for anything that I thought should have been, the movie Challengers with Zendaya that came out this year. It was a movie about tennis. How did that not win a music award? That score is probably the best score I've heard in the last 5 years. The cinematography in that movie is breathtaking. Granted, you had movies like Dune. You had big movies with great cinematography, so it would have had an issue there. But the music in that movie swept everything. In Dune 2, which also was snubbed in a lot of stuff and was not nominated for nearly enough and barely won enough, that had a great soundtrack. A phenomenal soundtrack, really. And but I do think that Challengers had the better soundtrack, and that was the only movie that I think just didn't get enough nominations. It did get a few, but not nearly enough. Overall, I was happy with this year's Oscars. I like seeing the presenters, the musical acts that there were fine, except for the weird James Bond thing that I felt was kind of shoehorned in, but nonetheless it kind of worked. It kind of fit in with the LA theme, but overall, I really enjoyed this Oscar performance. I thought Conan was great. And yeah, I thought it was overall probably a 7.5 out of 10 Oscars. I don't know when we're going to get a perfect one again. But that about wraps up this episode of the Everything Podcast. Will, thanks for joining me, as always. And we'll see you all next week for an episode where we have a lot to talk about, a lot of trailers, a lot of news to talk about. But for this episode, we really wanted to focus on the Oscars and Daredevil. But yeah, thank you all for tuning into this episode of the Everything Podcast. We'll see you next time.